Hello and welcome back. Before we get to part 2, Real Talk, please allow us to fulfill our capitalistic duty and plug our Patreon, the Contrarians Supplements.
That's right. For a small fee, you too can help the Contrarians rage on.
We have tiers ranging from just $1 to $10. It all depends on how much content you can handle.
Starting at $1, it's the Travoltis tier, which gets you access to new bonus episodes focusing on a new movie every month, as well as access to the patron chat. Join other patrons in making fun of our opinions.
Moving up to $3 is the Winonis tier, which unlocks access to our pre-recording notes, our video reviews, and our spin-off show, Contrarians After Hours.
That's a more laid-back space where we talk about other things we've been watching, reading, playing, thinking about. Sometimes it's related to the movies being covered in the main feed, but it usually isn't.
If you want to be part of those patrons who help us shape the show by telling us which movies to tackle, that's when you sign up for the $5 tier, the Embries, and the $10, the Gads.
Finally, all supplement subscribers, regardless of the tier, get access to our archive of special patron projects. Head over to patreon.com/contrarianprime now to join.
Be sure to listen through the end of the episode to find out what's coming up to the Contrarian Supplements this month. Now, it's time for some Real Talk.
Sometimes I wonder if I've changed so much, my wife is even going to recognize me whenever it is I get back to her. And how I'll ever be able to tell her about days like today. Ryan, I don't know anything about Ryan. I don't care. Man means nothing to me. It's just a name. But if going to Ramel and finding him so he can go home, if that earns me the right to get back to my wife, well, then that's my mission.
All right, we're back for Real Talk for Saving Private Ryan. What a film, Julio. I think this second half's going to likely be across the board glowing review.
Or will it be, Alex?
Oh, I'd hope so.
Maybe this is where Paul reveals that this most recent rewatch really, when forced to be critical and negative about Saving Private Ryan, he realized that there's a lot of problems with that movie.
9.5 year bit. I've been singing the praises, waiting for this moment.
Well, as I mentioned in Contrarians Corner, directed by Steven Spielberg, of course, written by Robert Rodat, released July 24th of 1998, estimated budget of $70 million. This bad boy went on to make about $500 million, so it did okay for itself. 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. Julio, I think it's probably just best to go ahead and get the quotes knocked out first. Who didn't like this movie and why?
Today they would be labeled un-American, I guess.
Yeah. Woke.
Yeah. The woke mob. We're going to start with Louis Project from rec.arts.movies.reviews, who says, "The only thing surprising about Saving Private Ryan is how conventional it is. I fully expected a much more noir vision of World War II along the lines of Oliver Stone's Platoon." Never seen Platoon. I know what? Platoon.
For real?
No, that what was about the review, not your. I haven't seen Platoon. Although actually, now I think about it, what?
I know the iconic Willem Dafoe moment with his hands up and everything, and I know the basics. Yeah, I just never got around to it. It's one of those blind spots. That is no World War II, though, right? That's Vietnam.
Yeah.
Platoon. Yeah, so don't compare them.
Noir view. Okay, wow.
Andrew Saris from The Observer says, "I found it tediously manipulative despite its Herculean energy." Steven Spielberg manipulative? No, never. Cole Smythe from ColeSmythe.com says, "Violent, harrowing," there's that word, Alex, "and horrific, you bet. This is not a movie to take your children to see or even a date."
Yes, the rating boards would make that very clear.
And it's definitely not worth seeing alone. How the ratings board gave this movie an R rating is a mystery. Oh. Well, maybe not.
Look, the Spielberg plays the political game. The fact that Lincoln got a PG-13 rating is pretty ridiculous. So, he knows what to do. If this was even in the late 90s, I don't know. But, one of my favorite things to go back to is the Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Streets, the movies that were repeatedly sent back saying too violent, too violent, too violent. And historical context goes a long way with the MPAA and just, the Motion Picture Society at large. So it's violent as fuck, but at no point did I find it to be, overkill.
Yeah, well, it would never be an R rating in America if it's just violent, right? It has to have a breast or a sex scene or something impure like that happening before we get to that particular stage.
When Matt Damon's telling his story, we should have had an actual flashback.
Oh,
where
that
you
would have
see
been
his
straight
brother.
away X.
Yeah,
That would put it over the top.
Inadmissible. Next, Serena Donadoni from Metro Times, Detroit, Michigan says Steven Spielberg has made a film about bravery that doesn't shy away from the horrors encountered by soldiers, even in a good war. But he wasn't quite brave enough to present the story without a comforting coat of saccharine. Oh, going for the heart.
Yeah, when I think saccharine, I think of Saving Private Ryan.
Yes. All those sweet moments every time that they blow kisses at each other. That was too much. We're going to close with Jeff Andrew from Time Out, who says, why did Spielberg make it? He wants us to imagine we can feel the terror of being there, but does that make us any wiser about this or any other conflict? Probably not.
That is particularly stupid.
Yes.
Like,
why do we make movies?
why do you make any movie? Of course, it's not the same as being there, you dickhead.
But it does bring up a point that I think is one of the main things. It's not like, why do you make this movie, but more like, what are you trying to say with this movie? That's not just Saving Private Ryan. That's like every movie that gets made, right? And sometimes what you're saying is like, I just want money. But usually when you get to like the Artsphere Fair, then there's usually something, there's a message, there's an intention. All great filmmakers, I think they have an intention behind the way that they shoot something, why they shoot it, and so on. And so what is Steven Spielberg's intention? And does it translate? Because I think this is one of those movies where your experiences definitely shape how you absorb the message or how you interpret what's happening. As far as Spielberg, I told you guys, like I bragged in Contrarians Corner, there is that little post-credits on the DVD where he literally tells you what he wanted. And I'm sure that's, he said it every time Private Ryan comes up. And, to him, this is just him honoring those who went and fought in World War II and were instrumental in defeating the Nazis and so on. So if there is a criticism from Spielberg towards the machinery of war and, the politics of war, the nonsense of war, I don't think that he necessarily brings it up when it comes up when he's being asked about it. And the movie maybe doesn't, the movie's about the people there and their heroism. And if along the way, I think you can like poke holes at the system, that is not, I think that's not something the movie's interested in. But that doesn't mean that they're not there to be poked. And that doesn't mean that the movie's, good or bad for them being there. So I think that maybe we can, having agreed, because like I said, I don't think this is a surprise, having agreed that we all like the movie, the three of us.
Yeah.
The takeaway when the movie's over, I think that's when things get spicy, extra interesting, right? Like, do you walk away from it feeling like this was just a celebration of World War II heroism on the American side, and I guess by extension, the Allied side? Or do you think there's maybe less apparent, but still there, like more subversive take, like a criticism of war doesn't make any sense? In what logical way does it make sense to send 8 men to rescue 1 man?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, is that an example, an encapsulation of the type of nonsense that is men shooting at each other? So how do you, I don't know, tell me guys, how do you feel like when you're done with the movie? I know it's like a broad question with a very complex set of answers, but just like a first feeling, like how do you feel when this movie's over? Paul, you go first because you're the guest.
For mine, it is that celebration of camaraderie, of brotherhood in the face of probable death and the like, and yes, the heroism, therefore the bravery, the courage that takes. But I also think it is an indictment on war not just for the reason what you're saying of the ridiculousness of this mission, but because Spielberg is so unflinching in his depiction of what soldiers face then. This is as we've discussed, as brutal and as horrifying as it gets. And if this is not the way that you recruit people to fight in wars, there's no way. That's why at the end, I will maintain a criticism of the film, and it is that fluttering flag. It feels out of place. Had it ended on Ryan there saluting Captain Miller, and by extension the squad of soldiers that rescued him or came for him at least, then that would be very clear. But then suddenly we've got this fluttering flag. So it does get a little bit murky, I think, in terms of how it opens and closes. But for me, this is not a pro-war film. It's an anti-war film.
Cap, you just let the enemy go.
This is such bullshit. You all got that right.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
Right, this is bullshit.
Shooting a prisoner,
How
that'd be
about shut
okay.
your
That's
mouth?
against the goddamn rules.
Yeah, well, the goddamn rules just walked off with your new friend.
Alex,
I can get on board with that.
pro-war?
Um,
I don't think it's pro-war at all. I'd be surprised if anybody watched this and thought it was pro-war. But I think I've seen some of the quotes and everything, where they talk about it being, there's the movies that paint war as being this kind of like cool thing, or they used to. Like I said, we don't make those movies anymore. I don't think that we
As
can.
you said, Spielberg broke the mold.
Yeah. But there's still like an exaltation of the act of serving that could be misconstrued as like a simplification of what is behind the war, right? Like going and fighting for your country, going for fighting for a cause, like a righteous cause, when somebody has to, and you step up and you do it, and you lose so much in doing it. That is one thing. But then I think that the movie could be accused of simplifying the process by which somebody finds themselves like fighting a war. Is everybody heroic here in Saving Private Ryan? And I think that, yeah, you may like some of the people and some of the characters more than the others, but not for the most part, like absolutely. I think that everybody there is like a hero through and through. And there are other movies that have depicted even the good guys as having like some very complicated shades of gray.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see that here, right? Like even the moment there's like the long sequence, one of my favorite in the movies, where they have that falling out about whether they're going to kill the POW or not, right? In the end, they all end up doing the right thing. It's kind of like this idealized version of war. And I can see how that could rub people the wrong way. I'm honestly still processing how it rubs me. And I saw this movie when it came out. And every time I watch it, I'm like, this is awesome. It's awe-inspiring. It fills me with all these feelings. But when it's over, I'm like, but is it like simplifying war, for the sake of just highlighting the brotherhood and the bravery? So it is complicated, and in a good way. I think that, it makes you think.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things about the movie too, I mean, you have the Adam Goldberg character, Fish, who definitely leans into his Judaism, but the movie establishes why we're at war and the atrocities that the Germans are committing and whatnot. But I think it does a pretty decent job of showing too that the Americans want to kill that dude when they have him outnumbered. The Americans, everyone in this movie in war, is just hell bent on senseless violence. It seems. Even I think one of the most interesting parts is how desensitized the crew has gotten when they're just going through those dog tags and kind of like laughing while doing so. There's that one that has like it's covered in blood and has a bullet hole in it. They're like, look at this guy, and like I think it does go to, of course, it's on America's side, so to speak, because it's depicting Americans fighting. But I don't think it's not rah-rah. It's not yay USA. It shows that war is senseless. That D-Day scene, when the gate comes down on all the boats, how many people die immediately. Like how just completely senseless it is. And I think the violence definitely rings home the horror of it and the pointlessness of it. Obviously, we're not here to talk about like World War II, why it happened, the fact that Hitler did need to be stopped, all that shit. But what this movie depicts is that war at large, I think, is fairly senseless. So much so that, there's directive given that 8 guys have to wade through battle to rescue one guy because all three of his brothers already died, and the military doesn't want, the whole family dying while it's over there. So because of that, it does make what Paul already called out, kind of, to me, the opening and closing a bit quizzical. Specifically the waving American flag like, it's the fucking World Series or something. I don't find the old man stuff necessary at all. I get the point of at the end of like, tell me I lived a good life. I hope I have, yada, yada, yada. But that kind of blew my mind when I read that review that implied that was just inserted because Titanic was so successful with that. I don't think that's why necessarily. I think that it's there to be relatable and to kind of nail home an emotional note with its viewing audience. But
I'm curious, even though you don't think it's necessary, did it still work? Like I was crying when it was over, and I was surprised. It's the first time I've cried with this movie, which I think it just comes with age.
Yeah, same thing, Julio. Same for me. I was a blubbering mess by the end of this movie. Like, what? Where did this come from? I've seen this movie 10, 12 times. It's the first time I can recall being in tears at the end.
Yeah, the first time I watched it, I didn't remember crying, but I definitely, when Tom Hanks is dying and like when he looks up and sees like the bombers flying overhead and shit, it's kind of funny because I was laughing several seconds before that because I'm sorry, Tropic Thunder has ruined that scene for me when he's shell shocked and looking around and seeing like all the carnage around him. I can only hear Jack Black at the closing of Tropic Thunder going, my ass. When because the ending of Tropic Thunder is the ending of Saving Private Ryan when they're trying to get across the bridge and blow it up and shit. So and they have the same scene where they're in the getaway, they all get blown apart, and Ben Stiller, for those who haven't seen it, wakes up, he's all shell shocked, and it's just like the end of this movie, only Jack Black is holding his butt and screaming my ass. So sadly I was like, God damn it. But then the closing stretch of this is just so moving and so powerful. And like, it's the perception in my lifetime, certainly, especially in America, of war has changed so dramatically, of like the heroism and, things that need to be celebrated. World War II, it seems pretty safe. Anyone who was involved with that, gets celebrated. The wars after that is where it gets a bit prickly. But point being, even with all that aside, I watched this as an adult and I'm just like, Jesus Christ, man. Like this shit, maybe not beat for beat what this movie portrays, but that shit happened. Guys over there that had no business like being in combat. You can make the argument that no one has any business being in combat, but more so school teachers and just random Joes that their country was like, all right, go kill some people. Born in the USA by Springsteen. Put a rifle in my hand to go and kill the yellow man. It's such a ridiculous concept to me. And as I've gotten older, that's why war movies don't like, it's not that they don't work for me. I just find them hard to watch and think about what guys have gone through centuries, that there's no preparation for that. And there's this movie illustrates in some aspects, there's really no reason for it. So at the end of this, I was just kind of more overwhelmed than I was expecting myself to be. Another thing with war movies, just so all cards are on the table, I accidentally, as a little kid, saw the scene in Casualties of War where Sean Penn rapes that woman, and it like traumatized is a very dramatic word, but it kind of traumatized me from war movies. Yeah. Because when the age I saw it at, I didn't understand really what was happening, nor did I know that I was so young that I didn't know what rape was. And that really fucked my head. And so that's always kind of been a long-standing apprehension with war movies. And so I don't like Hacksaw Ridge is a great example of a movie that's come out in modern time that everyone celebrated that I feel like I should watch. But for whatever reason, I kind of have this mental block when it comes to war movies. The positive spin I can put on that right now is that I'm glad this project came along to do this, because I had forgotten cinematically, like visually, this may be one of the most impressive movies I've ever seen. The whole idea of like the living set and the editing and like the Normandy scene is ridiculous. I read our boy John Keating's review. He gave the movie 3 stars, but he said that the Normandy sequences arguably the most impressive thing that's ever been put on film. So the emotions I bring into war movies and like the inner conflict I have with like thinking about war and being in that situation aside, this is just a hell of a motion picture. This is what movies are supposed to be, boys.
I just completely disconnected after I heard
3 stars.
John's score. Yeah, I was like, what?
Sergeant, we have crossed some strange boundary here. The world has taken a turn for the surreal.
Clearly, but the question still stands.
Before we ask Paul what is it that he enjoys about war movies, since
I can understand that too. Not to like steal his thunder, but like there's such a human aspect to it.
Yeah,
and there is a big part of it as I've gotten older. I do enjoy watching movies with human touch, but like as I've gotten older, it's more about like emotional love, like real stories depicting that. Like anything, you know how I am about like running away from movies about people battling disease or Alzheimer's or something like that. I understand that's real, and it's because just what I explained, this conflict of emotions I come away with, it creates like this inner dialogue in myself about what I'm watching that I'm like, yeah, but I could also just kind of watch The Untouchables right now and be happy. So, you know.
Well, I think that there's the idea that war is hell, and we are at a point now where if war is not depicted as hell, then we just feel shortchanged. We just feel like it's not authentic in a way that we're just conditioned. And that's my thing. If I watch a war movie now and it's a war movie from like back in the day, I just have that barrier of like, oh, this feels pretty fake because it's not Saving Private Ryan, you know, in anything that came after. And if I watch a war movie from today, it's just a punishing experience because it has to be, you know, realistic, and it's a beatdown because there's no happy endings. You know, it's like even if the good guys win or if the good guys survive, you know that there's a legacy of consequences that follow. So it's always kind of a downer.
And it is very interesting given our ages and our age ranges, and exactly what I said of how dramatically the perception of war and like defending your country, how dramatically that's changed. It just is natural to create a bit of conflict emotionally when watching something like this.
Yeah,
should be clear. Anyone that served, God bless you, appreciate it. But it's
of course,
it's just a much different thing now than it was when, you know, if Miller had made it home from war, the way he would have been perceived is a lot different now than when veterans come home.
Well, okay, that's a good segue to what I was going to say. So, Paul, we'll get you to in war movies in a minute.
Sure.
But I have to say that American flag at the end, this is the first time that I've had this read, which now on its face, it seems pretty obvious. And I even saw some Rotten Tomatoes quotes that maybe alluded to it, but just that earn this, you know, Miller telling Damon earn this is the veterans telling America earn this. And so suddenly that faded away American flag at the end is not like America rah rah, but more like, hey, America, you need to do better. You know, at least that's how it read this way as I was watching it. You know, I was like, Captain Miller says, earn this. And then we have 4 years of Donald Trump as president. Like that's what it felt like, you know, it's a whether Spielberg intended it or not, when I watch it and I see that image at the end, it doesn't feel like it's telling us America kicks ass. It feels like, man, we've gone through a lot and we can't stop trying, right? And so Damon becomes this surrogate for the entire country. I wouldn't go as far as saying the world, but maybe that's how, you know, like somebody in Australia, like you read it and how does that feel, right? Again, these men went and sacrificed everything and we won the battle, and then what are we doing today to honor that sacrifice? You know, are we doing something that would make them proud, that would make them think like, yeah, it was worth it, right? And I'd never, again, you know, it comes with age because I've seen this movie a number of times. It never even crossed my mind. I would always get to that final shot. I would kind of roll my eyes and think like, man, Spielberg, you need to pull back. It doesn't have to, you know, be that. And now I kind of feel like, no, maybe it needs to be there. The movie gives you such an explicit look at all these men like suffer, and then when you get to the end, like you've lived it, so maybe you're a little more open to that read. maybe I should do better. Maybe we should the idea of this country should be, we should be aiming a little higher than what we've been doing lately. I don't know. It just felt like the kind of criticism that I didn't read on it like when I was younger.
If you read it like that, that's like that's a fair takeaway to be like, for better or worse, this is, it's the Childish Gambino song, "This is America." That was my whole point of that flag means something a lot different right now today than it did even in 1998. And so it's just natural. And it's awesome that we have someone who has no stakes invested in the United States of America on this podcast to even kind of offer their thought on it as well. So it's
do you have no stakes on America, Paul, or are you just like over there kind of like, man, what are they going to do next?
Well, I mean, I don't want to sound too critical because it's not like our country's in perfect working order and everything's wonderful here in Australia. But I think everyone watches the unfolding drama around your impending elections with bated breath. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah. So let's combine both. War movies, you like them. Would you say they're like among your favorite genre?
Yes, but I mean, I think anyone who listens to the countdown or knows me at all knows horror is by far my favorite genre, and then it's sort of daylight back to action, war films. Yeah, and the older I get, the more the prestige dramas impact upon me too. I seek more of them out than I used to as a younger person. But I do really like your read there at the end, Julio. That sits much better with me, what that flag represents, than, as you say, the eye rolling kind of, oh, come on now, which is where I was sitting before you made that point. So thank you for that. But yeah, war films are, generally speaking, if they're done well, and as you've both suggested, in the last 25 years or so, those that have been made, especially about any conflict post World War II, like you said, Alex, they aren't funny. They're not fun. They're not rollicking adventures. They are gritty.
They're not White Christmas.
No, they are gritty, down in the dirt, kind of seeing the best and worst of humanity in the most extremist situation type films, or microcosms of the same, or seeing how people respond after they've come back. Again, as you suggested, Alex, that very different in any war after World War II than they would have been at that particular time, at least as far as I understand it. So, yeah, I still enjoy war films, for want of a better term. I appreciate them. I like them. I get a kick out of them, I guess maybe is the right way of putting it. And this, of those war films, to my mind, remains the seminal masterpiece of this genre for all the reasons we tried to critique it for, in my case. Almost everything I said in Contrarians Corner is an exaggeration of a minor little quibble I might have had, like Capazzo standing up in the ignoring his captain's orders, just losing himself for a moment in behind enemy lines and all the rest of it. Or something we didn't mention, the very obvious dummies that are full of the Tom Savini blood that are on top of the tank when a 20mm cannon starts or gun starts firing, and they just all disintegrate as well. It's very obviously a dummy just leaning there before it explodes, like the second or third one that explodes. Littlest things like that, because the character building, I think, in this film is outstanding. That all of these characters, all of these soldiers are individuals that have enough life invested into them, or character work invested into them, even with the exception of probably Vin Diesel's Capazzo, who dies too early to really get that. All the rest of them you give a shit about. All the rest of them, with the possible exception of Upham after he does what he doesn't do, you want to live and you want to see it. And every time one of them dies, like, oh, damn it. And very, very few films can achieve that in the context of putting together the most, I'll use the word again, the most harrowing and apparently realistic bookend battle sequences to be ever put to film for a war movie.
When you end up killing one of your men, you see, you tell yourself it happened so you could save the lives of 2 or 3 or 10 others, maybe 100 others.
Yeah, Giovanni Ribisi's death is particularly like blood curdling, just
really hard.
And Vin Diesel's is too, because he's obviously like in shock and he's trying to get that letter out for his dad.
Thank you.
It's
can I mention the letter? Do you subscribe to the theory that the letter is cursed? Because everyone who picks up that letter dies next.
Man, that doesn't bode well for Ryben then, because he's
taken it. That's right.
He's the last one, right?
I'm not sure about next. Well, obviously Captain Miller gets it. I don't think he dies next because Jackson and Mike die before him. But yeah, it goes from Carpazzo's written this letter to his dad. Wade takes it. Wade dies. Captain Miller takes it. Captain Miller dies. And so it's this cursed letter, which I find quite interesting.
Internet, you're welcome. If you haven't yet, take that and run with it. Upham. You mentioned Upham and maybe, the least sympathetic character, except that, and this is not breaking news. I think everybody always gets brought up. Like, Upham is us, right?
Yes.
If we're there, that's who we would be. Assuming that we would make it all the way to the third act of Saving Private Ryan, we would be the guys that just freeze and are empathic. And
I did have a bit more patience and a bit more understanding of his character watching this as a late 30s adult versus a 14-year-old.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I've had the same journey with him where, at some point you just have to accept it. Well, I probably wouldn't do any differently.
Everything he does through the course of the film, from dropping his typewriter to being the voice of conscience when Steamboat Willie is going to be murdered by the rest of the squad, to freezing up when the bullets are flying everywhere out in the street. He's trying to get the ammo back to Mellish and Max Martini. All of that stuff I'm fine with. But him crawling up those stairs alone when he can hear a life and death struggle with one of these guys who maybe mate's too strong a word, but he's formed this bond with and he doesn't act then, that to me, and it's meant to. Spielberg and Rodat wrote this to be exactly, or created this scene to be exactly what it has elicited in me. It's meant to be outrageous. It's meant to make you angry in your blood boil. You're not meant to sympathize with Upham at that point.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that's why it's very interesting in another kind of what it adds to the complexity of the movie, of the ending, is that he shoots Steamboat Willie at the end. And on the surface, that is very understandable. It's like that's another thing where I think that we would all, if we were given in that position, would probably do the same, or we would think that we would do the same, right? He knows that he killed Miller. In a way, it's a betrayal of like, well, I let you live. I argued for your release. It makes me, in a way, indirectly responsible for the death of Captain Miller, so on. It's like he shoots him. But on the bigger picture, what the movie's saying, because I was thinking about it as I was watching, I was like, man, I love this movie. This movie's great. You can't really say that it's a movie about characters that have an arc, except for Upham, right? Like everybody from beginning to end, I mean, they learn a few things. They change their mind. Ryben learns to be a little more tolerant, but for the most part, they are the same person that they were at the beginning of the movie, except for Upham, who goes completely against his beliefs in that final scene and kills a prisoner of war. So what is that telling you, in the way that it's depicted? Is it a triumph? And yes, we all go like, fuck yeah, because we want to see that guy die because he shot Tom Hanks. But it's also like the tragedy of like the one guy
war changes everything.
Exactly. That's the movie telling you, he was the most innocent of them all. And is it telling you that that's just how you have to be in order to survive, right?
Yeah.
If you show mercy, if you don't get killed, somebody else might get killed anyway. So is it saying this is the way? Or is it saying, unfortunately, this is just how it is when it's war? And that's another reason why it's just hell and not making sense, And that is, I think, a message that can get lost or a point that can get lost in the rest of the climax.
Tobey Maguire and Brothers, man. That's a great example of like the celebration of people who just do fucked up shit over there and never the same again.
That's Ryben basically when he comes back. Like he's the one that survives, but he's not going to be the same again.
He's got the letter. I'm not sure he makes it back.
Yeah, that's right.
Before we jump off Upham, the scene where he kills Steamboat, Steamboat Willie, not Ricky Steamboat. I wanted to say that cinematically, I really like that. For all the violence throughout the movie, that part, it's just the shot on his face the entire time when he shoots the guy and you hear the body hit the ground of like, I don't know necessarily what it's trying to say, but for all we go through with Upham, that's the moment like we go through just with him. It's not a wide shot. No one else is in it. It's a very interesting approach. That really resonated with me for some reason.
Yeah. Can I go back then to tell my story about?
Yes.
Please do.
That scene where we've talked about it to death, both in Contrarians Corner and now in Real Talk, where Upham freezes up at the bottom of the building and he climbs the stairs painstakingly slowly and he hears Mellish fighting with that German soldier. I saw this on opening weekend in Australia back around about July. I would assume maybe it came out a week or two later, as often was the case back in those days. So somewhere at that point in time on a Friday night in the biggest cinema in Perth, which was packed. It was one of those ones where the line's out the door, and back in those days there wasn't reserved seating, at least here, so you just had to get the best seat you could, and we did manage to get some pretty good seats, sort of middle, down the front right. This voice rings out as the guy's about to thrust the knife into Mellish's chest, and he's saying, wait. This voice rings out, "You don't leave your mates behind," from a very gruff sounding gentleman. And Mellish dies, and the soldier walks past, a German soldier walks past, up and laughing at him. And a guy was escorted out, half carried out by his friends, clearly a veteran, and the whole cinema bursts out laughing at that point. It was so tense and then that happens and everyone, just that nervous laughter escape. And this poor guy is dragged, almost not kicking and screaming. He was crying. He was being carried out by his mates.
Right.
He just could not handle it, and clearly just only caught a glimpse of him as he went past up the darkened stairs towards the exit. But he was clearly of veteran age, and he had clearly fought in wars, and that's evoked that kind of reaction. And that was a moment I realized that I was watching greatness on screen. To elicit something like that from someone who had been there, how many films could have said to have done something similar ever?
Wow.
Yeah, one of the quotes, I didn't pull it for this, I pulled it for our warm-up on video, but it mentions something about how this movie would make an audience maybe recontextualize the images they have of their grandparents or great-grandparents, which is 100% true. Like, I think that there's, it's so vivid that then you think, well, there were actual people that were there going through something like that man, anybody. And that's anybody that was there. Like Alex was saying at the beginning, I think, of this segment, it was like, this is stuff that happened in a way. It's stuff that still happens in a different, set of circumstances. So it's, I remember hearing that story in one of your episodes.
Told it before on the show, but obviously for your audience, and I hope that's not come across as disrespectful. It's not meant to. The audience laughed because it was just the unexpected shock of someone yelling something like that, not because they're laughing at the guy. They were more laughing at, geez, what a reaction in surprise. And then there was nothing but sort of sympathetic murmurings as he was carried out. So yeah, quite the reaction. And my dad, he wasn't he never served active war. He was an Army Reserve and did all the training and that. A couple of people died as a story, which I won't go into now. But, he said, this is everything that we feared. This is what everyone in the Army Reserve was worried about facing, basically, back when he did it. And my grandfather, his father was a soldier in the Polish army in World War II. And, and he had some things to say. I remember asking him as a kid, did you kill someone? He goes, I don't know. You stick your gun over the top of the wall and you fire it.
Oh, shit.
You don't stick your head up to find out whether you hit anybody. And he was captured by the Germans. He was a prisoner of war camp, and he was on death row for smuggling in bread when the Allies won the war and they were all released. So, yeah.
Fucking hell. That's both of my grandfathers were in the military. Neither of them saw combat, but one of them was on a boat going through San Francisco. The way the story's been told, this, of course, is being handed down for a couple generations. So, but my grandpa said he remembered going under the Golden Gate Bridge, and they were on a boat basically on the way to battle when the Allies won and took over. So, they were like, all right, turn the boat around. So, it's no POW action. That shit's fucking crazy. It's I think that's another thing. Again, we could go all day with this, but that's just one of the interesting things about that. I think a lot of times now, especially with the modern interpretation of war, some of those ideas get trivialized. But World War II is especially, a lot of people in our age ranges, their grandparents served in some capacity, and it's just insane to think about. The idea of Julio, the idea of you and me putting on boots and going somewhere to fight, is so far beyond what our realm of comprehension is now. And school teacher Miller in this, it was, well, all right, duty calls, got to go. That I am not anywhere near that level of tough. I would have said you, Paul, but Australia, you guys kind of stay in your own lane. You don't fuck with other people too much. So.
We're too small. We just get squished.
Griven, pay attention now. This is the way to gripe. Continue, Jackson.
All right, let's knock a few things out before we get out of here. Number one, Julio, I mentioned you were kind of dancing around a little bit of what the alleged first draft of this movie was. So, Spielberg's initial concept for Saving Private Ryan was a boys' own style adventure film in which the search for Ryan was a public relations effort by the War Department. However, after interviewing several World War II veterans for research, he found the idea to be inappropriate. He decided to embed the story with a realistic portrayal of actual events while portraying the conflicted morality of sending men into a life-threatening situation to save one man. He said, I cannot tell you how many veterans came up to me and said, please be honest about this. Don't make another Hollywood movie about World War II. Please tell our story. There is some truth in this. The Nyland brothers, I guess it was what the Ryans are based on in this. There was 4 of them, 3 of them killed. Had to go rescue one of them. So, what you were kind of talking about, I can't remember if it was in jest or not, but the idea of like the military doing kind of like a save face thing to bring one person home is somewhere, again, according to lore here, that was part of the initial concept of this movie.
I totally buy it. I love the movie as it is, but I totally buy it a lot more as a PR stunt. I don't think that you can just drop it like that, though. I think that you need to set up the idea. You need to spend some time in the movie setting up why they need this PR stunt.
Yeah.
And maybe even setting up the character that thinks that this PR stunt is needed, and then so on. This is something that once it got in my head, I couldn't get it out, and I kept kind of patting myself on the back. It's gonna be because I was like, I can't wait for Alex's face, probably Paul's face as well, when I say it. Because here's the thing: you haven't watched it, Alex, but you did the Fablemans, Paul,
no, I've
like
not
the
seen
last
it.
Spielberg movie.
No,
oh, you haven't?
no.
Okay. I wasn't crazy about it, but it's basically his sort of autobiographical movie, and there's a fair amount of time devoted there to seeing him, or the character that's supposed to be him. He's an aspiring filmmaker, and he makes war movies, and they're like the old-time war movies where it's just like for the fun of it, and explosions and his friends running and whatever. And so watching this, I was like, hey, you can connect those dots. And that got me a train of thought of like what we used to do with war movies, what they were like, and then what Spielberg did and what happened after. You know what? Saving Private Ryan is the Watchmen of war movies, because it takes that genre.
All right, let's see where we're going here.
That's where we're going. It's like what Watchmen, both the graphic novel and the movie, they did for the superhero genre. It's like, in a way, you could say it's what Saving Private Ryan did for war movies, for the mainstream. Because yes, you had stuff like Apocalypse Now and Platoon and all stuff, but those, I don't think that they're mainstream in the way that a Steven Spielberg movie is mainstream, and the way that it just gets that type of release, and
with Tom Hanks in the lead, no less.
With Tom Hanks in the lead role, exactly. And he takes it and he kind of deconstructed. I mean, that's the the absurdity and the magic that this works, that he takes a story that is literally the kind of thing that you would see in one of those old movies, right? Like, in the middle of the war, we send these 8 guys to rescue this one guy. Like, it doesn't make sense to my modern sensibilities of like, where I'm jaded. I'm like, the government would never do that. He takes it and he just puts all this grit, and like he makes it like a real war movie, and somehow it works. And that's, Watchmen took like what we know of superhero tropes, and it's like, okay, but what if they were really fucked up? Because you have to be really fucked up to like put on a costume and go on like, be a vigilante. And it kind of redefined what superhero movies or superhero comics in a way, were. And then after that, everybody was chasing that high, and it was like, oh, we need to do the next Watchmen. And that's what Spielberg did with the war movie with Saving Private Ryan. And it's like, we can do this and be mainstream. And then, you have the good stuff that came of it and the bad stuff that came of it. But that is the idea that we can, that I can like draw a line between Spielberg and Zack Snyder, or Spielberg and Alan Moore. It just tickles me. So direct all hate mail to me. I said it, not Paul, not Alex.
Well, Alex, one thing there that you did remind me is that one of the bad things that came out of this film, of course, was the fact it was snubbed. We've talked around it. We haven't mentioned it yet.
Yes.
Snubbed for
We're saving that.
Best Picture. Sorry, Alex, I've stolen your thunder. Please take it away.
No. You perfectly segued. I was trying to figure out how to get there, but that was kind of going to be my closing note. Real quick, I just want to read this little blurb before we get to the hilarity of the 1999 Academy Awards. Okay. The summer of 1998 theatrical season began in May with Deep Impact, a surprise box office hit that studios saw as a positive indicator of the upcoming 100 film releases. Godzilla and Armageddon were expected to be the biggest successes, while industry executives were hopeful for smaller budget films, meaning 60 million or less, such as Small Soldiers, The Negotiator, go check out our episode on that, The Parent Trap, and There's Something About Mary to become sleeper hits. And oh boy, did There's Something About Mary become a sleeper hit. Fewer sequels and less escapist entertainment were scheduled for release, and more films were targeted towards older audiences. Saving Private Ryan was highly anticipated, but analysts suggested the film faced commercial limitations because of the long runtime, restricting the number of times it could be screened daily, and its violent content. DreamWorks marketing chief Terry Press said it was risky to release a serious drama in the summer, a time generally reserved for family and escapist entertainment, but it was offset by the draw of Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks. A screening for DreamWorks and Paramount executives was highly praised, but Spielberg himself had low expectations, believing the film was too violent to attract broad audiences. So Titanic, we talked about this in the episode, the hilarity of a movie like Titanic or Saving Private Ryan, there being like a gloom and doom about how, thinking in retrospect of like the Titanic, 20th Century Fox or Paramount, I can't remember who had it, but they were trying to like get rid of it because they thought they were going to lose so much money on it. And this whole thing here with DreamWorks thinking of, we're going to lose our ass on Saving Private Ryan. That's just very funny to me. The same summer, Julio, 2 weeks later, if you wanted to do a double feature, you could see Snake Eyes in Saving Private Ryan or Halloween H2O in Saving Private Ryan if you wanted to double up. So that brings us here to we talked about the financial success, so the critical success all over the place. It's time to talk about accolades. At the 56th Golden Globe Awards, Saving Private Ryan won Best Drama and Best Director and was nominated for Tom Hanks Best Actor, and John Williams, unsung hero here, providing the score.
Yes.
And Best Screenplay. At the 71st Academy Awards, Saving Private Ryan won Best Director, Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, Best Sound, and Best Sound Effects Editing. While it was nominated for Best Actor, Best Original Screenplay, Music, Production Design, Makeup, and Best Picture, which this is up there, right, fellas, as far as one of the most hilariously aged picks the Academy ever made?
Yeah. One of those has certainly stood the test of time through the ages. And then there is the one that won the Academy Award thanks to Miramax's aggressive marketing
and politicking,
and schmoozing, shall we say.
So we have an episode on Shakespeare in Love. I nearly had a heart attack. My blood pressure got so high talking about that movie. So you can go check that out if you need to. Shakespeare in Love took home Best Picture. And man, it really resounded with me how shocking that the idea of that was after this most recent viewing of Saving Private Ryan. He did win, as we mentioned, Spielberg, that is, won Best Director.
Something.
Something. Best Original Screenplay also went to Shakespeare in Love over Saving Private Ryan. And also would age hilariously had it not been for Shakespeare in Love. Roberto Benigni won Best Actor over Tom Hanks in this. No disrespect to Roberto Benigni, but that's kind of one of those infamous moments in Academy Award history where he like walked over the chairs, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And then it was a week or two later, Ray Romano hosted Saturday Night Live, and they did this skit where it was Roberto Benigni going out to eat. And when they call his name, when his table's ready, he walked over all the tables and was like kissing people and being like, my table's ready. And everyone's like, oh, he's so charming. That was like the gist of it. That's what I always think of. As far as like a modern equivalent, King's Speech beating Social Network comes to mind as far as like something that's egregious, but this has to be top tier, like what the fuck Academy Award moments.
Yeah, I think so. I think Pulp Fiction not winning could also.
Well, you hate Forrest Gump, so hits you a little harder.
Paul, I think you would at least concede that Forrest Gump is a bit more like of a deserving movie than Shakespeare in Love is.
Well, it certainly stood at more test of time than Shakespeare in Love for sure. And if I had the choice of watching one of those two, or had to watch one of those two, it would be Forrest Gump. So yes.
Tell me about your wife and those rose bushes.
No. No, that one I saved just for me.
All right. Well, I think we've given this movie its just due, and it sounds obviously Paul came into this one of his all-timers, and I really am glad, all my joking aside about how we were going to do this, I'm glad this came about, because I honestly don't know when I was ever going to, not to say get around to watching this again, but I think the idea of a movie I watched when I was 14 sticking with me so dramatically to the extent of like, man, I don't know if I'm ready to watch that again. Getting to rewatch it though, coming away with like the technical awe of it, and also even the kind of I forgot how much of a that guy movie it is, which helps to put it over the top. There's a reason it has the legacy it does. It's a very important movie that was made, and will continue to be so. And I guess I can second somehow that Watchmen comparison, in the sense that it's aged very well and will continue to do so. So this gets an A for me. Saving Private Ryan, excellent film. If you can handle the violence, if you've never seen it, and you can handle the violence and the moral quandary mentally that can be posed by your thoughts on war, I would definitely recommend checking this out. Paul, I do letter grades. Julio does stars. If you want to choose on a scale of colors, you can. However you want to rate this movie, go for it, man.
Look, I just went and checked my letterbox to be sure. I have 16 films that I've ever given 5 stars to.
My God.
And Saving Private Ryan is one of those 16 films. It's one of my absolute favorite films of all time. It will always be one of my absolute favorite films of all time. And as long as I am alive and kosher enough to be able to understand what's going on, it will get a run through every 3 or 4 years, and I'll probably cry harder every single time. So 5 stars, A+. I'd give this 98 out of 100 if you care for such things.
5 stars for me. It's just, I know it wasn't 5 stars at some point, especially at the beginning. I even when I was much younger, there was something that I had some resistance to the sweet parts of it, so to speak, and the overly patriotic parts of it. And even though I'm more cynical now, I think I also can appreciate more like what it's saying, the themes of it, and the complexity of it. I think it can be. It doesn't have to be just one thing. It doesn't have to be just a movie that praises war heroes. It doesn't have to be just a movie that criticizes the war. It can be everything. So, 5 stars for me. It's an all-timer. Is it my favorite Spielberg movie? I don't think so. Although this last rewatch has moved it up the ranks. I think I've said it
really
before
like Munich.
Yeah, I know you're a big Munich fan. I am more of
a Munich. Okay.
He likes that sex scene with Eric Bana at the end.
Oh, stop now.
I'm more of a Minority Report guy, but
oh wow, oh jeez, some hot takes.
I know.
I thought you were going to say Jaws or E.T. No, Minority Report and Munich. Okay.
It's still, this would be like very, very high up there. It's great, and Spielberg is an amazing filmmaker. He was.
Thank you. It needed to be said.
I think West Side Story, as recently, and actually West Side Story, Alex, is in our future, because we met that goal on the License for the Killer.
Unfortunately, yes.
That is happening. That's happening very soon. That's very recent. So I think he's still got it. But anyway, full endorsement from the Contrarians and from Paul, from the soon to transition into a different format countdown. So this is the time, Paul. This is where you I think all your listeners by now know that this is
the end is nigh.
Yeah, but it's not the end, right? At least I feel like on your show, every episode you're like, and it's almost over, and then Wayne will
Wayne goes, but it's not going to finish. Yeah.
Exactly.
Look, it's hilarious that Wayne is the one that keeps putting that little star asterisk next to this, because he's the one that does zero work behind the scenes to make it happen. So other than preparing for the episode, let's be fair to young Wayne.
Yeah.
No, look, the idea is that we'll record when we feel like it. Once every couple of months, we'll get together, record a couple of episodes. They'll just drop into people's feeds if they want to stay subscribed. We'll see. I know we've got lined up to do the top 10 films of the year early next year. So for 2024, that will be the first time we come together, and we'll just see what happens after that. But no more weekly show. if we still get invited to do reviews or advanced screenings, we'll drop a review in every so often for that stuff. But the obligation to get together every week, to edit 2 episodes every week and to put that thing out there weekly comes to an end on December 8th. So at least in terms of recording and release somewhere around mid-December 2024. So if you're a contrarian who's never listened to the show, I mean,
get to it.
There's 450 episodes you can download tomorrow if you want to. But yeah, get on board for the last 10 episodes and just see what kind of madness there is. Countdown, search for that. You'll find us, Countdown Podcast.
That was going to be my big question. Like, the back catalog is not going anywhere.
Not for at least, we'll put some money aside and we'll leave it up there for a couple of years at least, I'd say.
Okay. At
some point, the desire to just shell out money for nothing that's being added there will disappear. But for a little while at least, we'll let it sit there and, maybe 3 or 4 people will download 1 episode a week for a while to justify that.
I think that it's, we can't not call out for anybody who, is not a Countdown listener. What's the easiest way of listening to the episode where Wayne declared that Saving Private Ryan was the seventh best war movie of all time?
Yeah, unbelievable. Well, something that he will never live down. Episode 84, Top 10 War Films.
It's one of the running bits that it never fails to land. And
yeah, if you want to hear me be really upset, go to that episode where Wayne drops it at number 7. So yeah.
All right. Well, I'm glad that we were able to get you in here before
Absolutely.
the end.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's a long-time listener, first-time contrarian contributor. It's been an absolute blast. Thank you for picking this film as well, for letting me come on for this film. It was really hard the first half. It's been an absolute delight the second half, but overall it's been an absolute blast. Thank you both.
Thank you for coming in. You may stop the countdown or make it less frequent, but that doesn't mean that you can't, like you said, come on and guest another podcast so we can. You're
Anytime.
Still podcast celebrity doesn't die, Paul. So we'll have you over some other time.
Someday we might look back on this and decide that Saving Private Ryan was the one decent thing we were able to pull out of this whole god-awful shitty mess.
All right, Julio, that's going to do it for Saving Private Ryan. We made it to the end. Now let's look to the future. What do we have on deck coming up?
Coming up next, it's funny that those words you use, because in fact, we're going to be looking at the past 12 months. Next episode is the Embry's 2024 edition, in which we hand out awards to the best and the worst that we covered in the past Contrarians year. So we're going to start with Original Sin all the way down to Saving Private Ryan. We'll hand out Embry's, we'll hand out Huey's, we'll give out the Ruffalo, the Gad, the Anti-Gad. We'll even give out Lancaster Dodd grant for the development of white people movies. 1 or 2. We'll see. There's a lot of stuff that we covered over the past year. And as usual, we'll celebrate one more year of Contrarians goodness just by praising everything that we liked and pointing out the stuff that we didn't like. It'll be fun. And the celebration doesn't end there, Alex. It extends into our Patreon channel. We're not just celebrating one more year of Contrarians goodness, we're also celebrating 10 years overall of Contrarians goodness. And that means that the bonus episode for this month, available to all patrons, is a conversation between the two of us about our top 10 movies of all time. Each of us brings out their top 10 of all time. We just take turns. We talk about them, and we already recorded this, and it looks like it's going to have to be a 2-parter. We have to break that in 2 because it was a long conversation. A lot of fun, though. So if you're a patron, you're going to get that. We also have 2 QVRs this month. One is our dual QVR, just Alex and I, talking about The Boys, demanded/requested by patron Ryan. Not The Boys, the TV show. The Boys, a movie, I guess. But I don't know anything about that. I haven't looked into it yet. But whatever it is, Alex, we're going to be watching it together and sharing our thoughts. And then, as part of our 10-year celebration, we are bringing our friend Corey, friend and editor Corey, to join us in I guess we'll call it a triple QVR. It'll be the 3 of us talking about the movie Highlander, a blind spot for me, a movie that Corey has watched plenty of times, and a movie that Alex is familiar with, but not as familiar as Corey is with the exploits of Christopher Lambert and Sean Connery. And then we have, of course, Contrarians After Hours, one more After Hours for October. Alex, what are you bringing to Contrarians After Hours this time?
I recently went to another concert, and I spoke very highly about the recent outing I made to see the original Misfits. Slipknot came and played in Austin at the Moody Center, the same arena. And yes, I am probably too old to be going to see them, but I didn't get to go see them when I was younger, in my teens or my 20s. So went ahead and crossed that off the list. So I'll be recounting my jaunt to see Corey Taylor and his assortment of madmen on stage. What about yourself?
Well, Alex, I finally picked back up my Only Murders in the Building watch. And so I finished season 2, which is almost where you are, according to our exchanges over text. That means that we can talk about the first 2 seasons of Only Murders in the Building without spoiling each other. So I look forward to doing that on this After Hours. I'm also going to tell you briefly about a movie I watched with Jessica Chastain and James McAvoy called The Disappearance of Eleanor Rigby. I had it on my watch list for a while, and I saw it was streaming for free. So I check it out. I have thoughts. I think it's one you might want to check out. Even if you don't want to check it out, maybe our patrons will be interested. So The Disappearance of Eleanor Rigby, Only Murders in the Building, seasons 1 and 2, and Slipknot, a concert, a show that might have been too much for Alex at his age.
As one does.
But that's it. You can look forward to that on our Patreon if you want to join, patreon.com/Contrarian Prime. Now, one more time before we get out of here, Paul, say goodbye to our audience.
Say, Contrarians, enjoy what's to come from the mad minds of Julio and Alex.
Awesome. Let's get out of here.
Welcome to our end credits.
Or as we usually call them, our perennial plugs.
We start off by giving thanks to the Festive Years who provide our opening and closing tracks. They kick us off with Last Stand and take us home with Summer of 99. Be sure to head over to thefestiveyears.com for any and all Festive Years needs.
Our friend and fellow podcaster Hans Rothgieser is the man behind our logo and all the art you see related to our show. Reach out to him and let him know how much you like that little tomato. His email address is mildemonios@hotmail.com and his website is mildemonios.pe. That's MILDEMONIOS. You can also check out his podcast Nación Combi about Peruvian current affairs and Marginal about economy. Hans, thank you for all your support.
For those interested in the regularly absurd world of professional wrestling, Joe and the boys over at latenightgrin.com have you covered. Tell them the Contrarians sent you.
And we like to close with special thanks to our social media team of Zoe Perez and Coriari. Each of the social media accounts we mentioned in the introduction look as good as they do because of their work.
So that'll do it for this episode of The Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong, and we will catch you next time.
How much money